The stock market is great. GDP is this or that. That's all we hear from our politicians. But we're still suffering. Take me, for example. I'm disabled. I have an asset limit on my assets, so I can invest in the stock market. I can have around $2,000 at a time. I make $1,500 a year. Congress, they make six figures. They do insider trading, and they say that's not enough. They get free health care for life, and they say that's not enough. Why don't, instead of investing in foreign wars, bombs, and ballrooms, we invest in affordable housing, walkable cities, high-speed rail, and free healthcare? Check this video out.
I support Congressman Moulton's amendment so we do not have a nearly $1.2 trillion defense budget. You know, that's 65% of the entire discretionary federal budget. 2/3 of the money of taxpayers is going to what they call the Department of War. Instead of going for jobs here in America, instead of going for child care here in America, instead of going for health care in America. You know, someone greater than everyone collectively on this committee warned about that. Dwight Eisenhower, who won World War II, gave the Cross of Iron speech. And he said every bomb built, every missile built was a school not built, a hospital not built, a homeless shelter not built. The American people are begging us in election after election saying, don't send our money overseas. Don't get into these wars. Listen to George Washington. How about having a Marshall Plan, not for Europe, but a Marshall Plan for America? How about rebuilding the deindustrialized towns? How about creating jobs here? Instead, we build out this budget and then we force our presidents into wars in Iran, and the American people feel betrayed. Now, I know I've been casting lonely votes on this committee. No, 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 no. They boo me on the committee sometimes. Kana, there's another no. And I warned they would raise this budget to over $1 trillion. And they said, "Ro, you're crazy. They would never do that." Well, here we are. Here we are. If we don't draw the line in the sand now, we're going to be consumed by a military-industrial complex that cares more about Tehran than Toledo. I strongly support Congressman Moulton's budget to actually put Team America first.
We spend over half the money we have for war for this country. We could have a utopia, but instead we work ourselves to death for war. Tell me why we can't have free health care?
We are put on this earth with agency to change our future, change the country's future, make the planet a better place. We're put here to make a difference. But if you're sitting at home, which is true for the millions of people who are able-bodied on Medicaid, on average, you're spending 6.1 hours watching television or just hanging around. That's not why you're here. So as a path to prosperity, Congress very wisely said, let's get you back into the workforce. Let's require you to get free health care coverage, to be able to work for 20 hours a week, or volunteer to make up the difference if you haven't worked 20 hours, or get an education. Just participate. And so that rule came out. It's a, I think, beautifully written effort to try to define for our nation what your part of the puzzle is. Because if you are going to get something that of value from the American people, there should be some obligation if you're able to. If you're not able to, if you're disabled, if you're, in one of the categories that are well defined in general, not able to work, it's different. But if you can work, you should get up and work again.
Hi, my name is Dr. Rubin, and Dr. Oz is painting a picture of Medicaid recipients sitting at home watching TV for 6.1 hours a day, making it seem like they are lazy and don't contribute to society when the facts don't fit his reality. What's really going on is that most non-disabled adults on Medicaid actually work, but they work low-income jobs that don't provide health insurance, so Medicaid is what they're able to access. And so we have tried work requirements in the past, and it typically does not work. In Arkansas in 2018, there was a work requirement put in place, and close to 20,000 people lost their health insurance without any meaningful increase in employment. Remember, when people have access to health care, they are more likely to be able to work because they're more likely to be healthy. So by having these work requirements and people losing their health insurance, they're less likely to be able to maintain their job status. This should not be framed as hardworking taxpayers versus lazy Medicaid recipients. The real policy issue here is that are we going to put in more bureaucratic red tape that could cause vulnerable people to lose their health insurance? That's the real question here.
We're put on this earth.
We're being way too harsh on ourselves. We're spending our time working 40 or more hours a week when we could be spending our times with our friends and our family. We're treating ourselves like slaves. How can we work if we're not even healthy enough to work, Dr. Oz? What the fuck sense does that make? Painting a picture that's not even real. This is what's wrong with our politicians and our leaders. They're misguided and they're wealthy and I've worked with so many people that were homeless, living in their cars, taking out loans in order to survive and to pay their bills. This is a regular thing for people. I know so many people, I haven't even worked with, people I know that live in their cars right now and go to work every day. People cannot afford this life. We're too busy having a class war. Check this next video out.
Minimum wage jobs are for high schoolers, yet when you go to McDonald's at 2 a.m., who's behind that counter making your food? When you go to Starbucks on a Monday at 9 a.m., who just made your coffee? Y'all continue to disrespect grown adults who work at these minimum wage establishments and say that is only for high schoolers, yet these services would literally cease to function during school hours if not for the fact that grown adults are able to work there. And the cognitive dissonance of you guys reaping the benefits of grown adults working at these establishments, yet simultaneously disrespecting them and saying that they deserve to be underpaid is not lost on me, but it seems to be lost on y'all.
We got money for war, but we can't feed the poor? Why can't people afford to eat? Check this out.
In the 1990s, a grocery store worker could afford to buy a house. Today, most workers at grocery chains like Kroger can barely afford to buy food. So what happened? Well, decades ago, there were dozens of regional grocery chains competing with each other. All that competition kept prices fair for the customers, but it also kept wages fair for the workers. Then came the Reagan era. In the 1980s, in an era of business deregulation led by US President Ronald Reagan, bigger grocery chains like Kroger began to buy up the smaller ones. Fast forward to today, when a single corporation can control almost every grocery store in your area, even if they're still operating under different brand names. Like Albertsons, which owns Safeway, Vons, Pavilions, and United, just to name a few. And when a few corporations dominate the market like that, workers lose their bargaining power, which means they lose their ability to organize, strike, and negotiate better contracts. Which brings us to the second big change, the slow death of union membership. In the 60s, 40% of grocery workers belonged to a union. Today, it's around 16%. And that's not an accident. This is the result of decades of corporate consolidation that made it easier to bust unions and strip away their power. Not to mention that companies who are famous for union busting, like Amazon, now own entire grocery chains like Whole Foods. Add up all those changes, and we've now reached a point where grocery workers at chains like Kroger's can now barely afford to buy food. The fixes to all this are actually pretty obvious. Antitrust laws to break up monopolies, and better protections for workers' rights to organize. Another good idea is more city-owned grocery stores, where prices can be kept low and wages high because the goal is to serve the community, not extract profit. Imagine that. Progressive ideas like these can restore dignity for grocery store workers and give power back to all working class Americans. So if you want to learn more about solutions like these and how to implement them, follow us at Pop Economy. In the 1990s,
we need our politicians to enact our antitrust laws. We need our politicians and we need our workers to develop unions to protect workers. We need more laws to protect workers. We need to stop subsidizing businesses that destroy our community and extract from us, all for profit. And we need to subsidize things that we need to live, like food and shelter and water. We need UBI. And I'm a big UBI guy, but this next video paints an even deeper picture about UBI. Check this out.
The wealth created by artificial intelligence should be used to create and fund a universal basic income. Do I think this is a good idea? No. No, I think it's a cop-out. And frankly, I am much, much more ambitious than a universal basic income from AI dividends. In my third and final piece for Bloomberg on AI and job loss, I bring up, the biggest problem with AI is the economy in which it's being debuted. I mean, we have deep structural inequality. And that is not just a result, that's also a production function. I mean, our economy is generating inequality. Our economy is generating a lack of investment in workers. Our economy is generating a loss of worker power. What I don't like about UBI is it doesn't interrupt any of those things. I mean, I've said before, if you want the right solution, you have to correctly diagnose the problem. Right now, the top 10% of workers on average make $250,000 a year. And the bottom 90% of workers on average make $45,000 a year. That is not because of AI, and $20,000 a year in cash will not fix it because it doesn't interrupt the production of that inequality in the first place. The ratio now between the top 10 and bottom 90% of earners is 6-1. In the 1950s and 60s, it was 3-1. This does not have to be a necessary component in our economy. And I suppose what I dislike so much about the let's use AI wealth to fund a UBI narrative is that it entrenches and perpetuates the need for that wealth to begin with. The idea that we have so much income and wealth concentrated at the top because now we're all dependent on it for our universal basic income. I don't feel like giving them another ounce of power or influence in our economy. I think we should reclaim that power for ourselves as workers so we're not dependent on them and we interrupt that production function. What does it look like? Yeah, I mean, it's not that hard. None of it is that hard. So, you just got to shimmy those shoulders, put on your big girl pants, and let's fix the economy, starting with labor market regulation. All of these things are things that we've had, and to a greater degree at one point in our economic history. A higher minimum wage, a higher exemption for the overtime through the salaries, basically making it so that most white-collar workers are now eligible for overtime, so no one works more than 40 hours a week, even if they pull down $75K a year. We need paid sick days. We need the regulation of shifts so low-wage jobs aren't miserably scheduled, and we need the protection and promotion of unionization. I mean, think about this for a second. Do you think it's possible that Congress will be able to legislate and enforce fast enough to keep up with the use of AI in the workplace and how employers use artificial intelligence and how they pay, surveil, monitor, promote, or fire employees? I don't think they can. I think that AI is really slippery and hard to regulate. But I think a union embedded in that workplace would do a pretty good job. I mean, yeah, you think of someone like Elon Musk saying we need to just give everybody a little bit of money. I'm like, no, we need to give everybody a union card and you would have a lot less power in our economy. I suspect that he knows it. The second thing we need to do is we need to unlink the relationship between your current employer and your benefits, specifically retirement and health. It should not be dependent on your current employer that you have a retirement savings account. It should not be dependent on your current employer that you have health insurance. We just need to snip, and cut those apart. We can have a retirement savings account that is universal for all workers that their employer can contribute to, but is not conditional on their employer funding or opening or maintaining. We can also unlink health insurance through, if you're a small government person, I need you to take a deep breath and get right back out again. We need universal enrollment in Medicaid. We need to have it so that every American is on Medicaid all of the time. And if they have a private plan, they can have it wrap around their Medicaid coverage, but you never lose health insurance in the US. You are always by right enrolled in Medicaid. So you are never you're never dependent on your employer to have basic health. This would create, I think, a lot of downstream effects of how the health insurance market is organized and how people consume healthcare. And I can talk a lot about that in the future. Don't really have quite the time to do it right now. But yeah, we all get Medicaid and then we make Medicaid better. And okay, I need to move on. The last thing we need to do is that we need to make investments in families and children. We need to have, like I said, paid family and medical leave, but free childcare, free after school, free summer programming, and free school meals. I study a lot the type of investments that we can make in children and their economic consequences. And I think it's really remarkable that if there is a negative effect of investing in children broadly, it is that the children of the very rich have less of an advantage. And if you look at collective harm of making massive public investments in children, the really only difference in outcomes that could be construed as negative is that it takes away the advantage that rich kids have from their rich parents. And I think that it is a massive power shift in our economy, not just to give workers in real time more power in their relationship with their employer, but to make our economy more equal in future generations by giving rich parents, by not having your outcomes so determined by your parents' income and your parents' largesse. Broad investments in children can do that. Now, if you hear me rattle all this off, you're like, where's the money going to come from? I think this is the other aspect of the AI narrative that I don't like, is they're like, oh, well, in order to have nice things, we have to have AI wealth, and that's the only type of wealth that'll pay for that. Absolutely not. We have a $30 trillion economy. Our government takes in plenty of money and can take in plenty more. I mean, imagine, if you will, some like rich trust fund kid who's, does things like decides that they want a bit of privacy, so doesn't just get a hotel room, but rents out every room in a hotel for a week just to make sure that no one sees them. Or they, buy a yacht and, I don't know, lose it. Whatever rich kids do. I don't know. But I mean, they're just so bad with money. And then they come to you and say, like, I'm broke. And you have to laugh in their face and say, no, man, you're not broke. You're just terrible with money. Our government is not broke. They're making terrible money decisions. And we don't need the wealth of AI to fund basic investments in children and families or workers. We have all the money we need. We need a higher corporate tax rate, restore it to a normal level, have fewer exceptions and deductions and loopholes. We need a higher personal income tax rate, restore it to a normal level with fewer exceptions, deductions, and taxes and loopholes. These rates don't even have to be that high. They could be what they were in the early 2000s, in the late 1990s, when we, still had an economy and a government, but we weren't in crippling levels of debt. We can do this easily on our own. I don't like being dependent on, billionaires and the wealth created by corporate concentration and agglomeration on any level. I don't want to be dependent on the wealth that they make or the benefits that they decide to give down to us. It's enshrining perpetually trickle-down economics, but putting it in the hands of private actors. No, thank you. We can empower workers. We can empower families. We can build a better economy, and we don't even need to consult them. And in fact, I don't think that they would like this, because worker power, true worker power, more money for workers that doesn't come from them, more money for families that doesn't come from them, that disempowers them. It's the childcare investments writ large. The more we invest in the bottom 90%, the less of a hold the top 10 or 1 has over us. I'm okay with that. I don't think that they are. I think that they like having all the power and money, which is why they're opposed to all of these other public policies and would prefer just to write you a check for 20 grand to get you to stay quiet. I won't stay quiet. I am much more ambitious. All of that said, I think there is a genuine, legitimate case for universal income. I would just need it to come after all of this. I would need to see all the labor market regulations, all of the unlinking of our benefits from our jobs, all of the investments in children. And after all of that has been done, if we think a universal basic income would help, then I would be for it. But at this point, it's just a weak substitute for better policy that actually changes our economy instead of entrenches us in the one that we have now.
We need so much more than UBI. We need better rights and pay for workers. We need universal health care. We need universal child care. We need the government to make better money decisions in general. Decisions based off of us and our well-being.
Oh, great. Caleb Hammer on Joe Rogan, my two favorite people.
I told people to not get a house, and they're really close to getting a house. That's something they will not give up, because that's another obsession that we have in our country. The American dream isn't owning a home anymore. It's the freedom of renting, because you can live wherever you want. You can move for a job like that.
A lot of people don't feel secure unless they own the home. They don't feel like settled. This is not really my place. I'm just renting it.
Yeah, which is true, but I mean, I just tell them to fuck off. That's your feelings. Yeah. I mean, that is just their feelings.
Right.
Like, I don't know. Math is math in the end. Like, I own, but that's because it was very affordable for me. It made sense for me.
Bro, shut up. Oh my God, I can't stand this dude. That's your feelings. It's your feelings that you want to own a home and have shelter and a place to raise your family. I mean, sure, I own a home, but that's because I'm not a stupid poor bitch peasant like you. Guy's a landlord, by the way. He makes money off of you renting. That's my financial advice. You should rent a house from me so I can buy a home. Bro, people in every society ever wanted to own houses. That's not just an American thing. You can go back to the freaking cavemen. Oh, but what about the freedom of giving half your paycheck to a landlord every month? If you don't want to do that, you're just in your feelings, bro. Caleb Hammer is a piece of work, bro. Like the modern day mouthpiece of credit card companies and landlords. He refuses to acknowledge that capitalism is failing the vast majority of people in this country. It's all just your fault. You should have started a big YouTube channel and got rich like me. These are the two most out of touch people I've ever seen on a podcast in my life.